Hey everyone, it's Kelly. Thanks for joining me. I am back today with a new 12 by 12 scrapbook process video for the Altenew May 2019 stencil release blog hop. So if you happen to be watching this video on my YouTube channel, I do want to encourage you to head to my blog, which I will have linked in the description box below. Altenew does have a couple different giveaways happening in the blog hop, so you'll want to head to my blog to check out all the details. I'm going to be starting my layout with one of the 6x6 stencils. This is the Illusion Spiral stencil, and I originally thought that I was just going to use it as part of my background design. That's why I'm making sure that it is straight with my T-square ruler, and then I'm also using some washi tape to hold it in place. I wanted the stencil to be yellow so it matched the coffee cup in my photo, and I'm going to use the Altenew embossing paste to add some texture to the stencil also. Now, typically when I use embossing paste, I have to pick a really bold color because when I mix it with the embossing paste, because the embossing paste is white, it tends to really tone down the color, but not with this Altenew embossing paste. I was really surprised how well it held its color. So it stayed that true yellow. I didn't have to add a bunch of extra paint to it to make it nice and bright. It worked really well. You're going to see that I'm going to do something similar a little later on with another stencil. And again, it holds its color very, very well. I was super, super impressed. I will definitely be reaching for this modeling paste or embossing paste the next time I want to add color and texture to my backgrounds. So as you can see, I was laying that embossing paste on there pretty thick. I wanted to have a lot of texture and I wasn't worried about it being smooth. I kind of like that ripple effect in embossing paste. Another thing that I like to do when I have leftover embossing paste and I've used a stencil is I'll grab my art journal and I'll just add the extra embossing paste to an empty page in my art journal. And then when I go to create my art journal, I already have a page started. So that's an idea if you have leftover embossing paste. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to another stencil from the release, and I'm going to be using the Floral Garden stencil, and I wanted to have some pink flowers for this. Now, these flowers don't actually end up making it onto the layout, but I wanted to leave this part in the video so that way you could see how this stencil works. So I'm using some pink Dylusions paint, which I showed you a few seconds ago, that it's all chunky, it's no longer smooth. It ends up working out okay for what I'm using it here. And again, that texture paste, the Altenew embossing paste, really holds its color. In fact, it was a little bit brighter than what I wanted, so I'm adding some white acrylic paint to try to tone it down a little bit. But again, super impressed with that Altenew embossing paste. So this is the Floral Garden stencil, and I'm going to show you the back here. What you do is you can use multiple colors, and then you can flip the stencil upside down, and you can use one color to create the florals, and then you can use another color to create the leaves, and it will create a full sheet of those. And I'm going to guess that this stencil is probably 6 by 10 would be my guess on the size. So you'll get a bunch of different flowers, and I just really think that's a genius idea. Now, in my case, I did have to set this aside and let it dry because I needed the modeling paste to be completely dry before I could add the leaves. But if you were using inks or even acrylic paint, you could lightly apply the paint through the stencil and you wouldn't have as much dry time as I did, but it was totally fine. I was really excited about this stencil. It's unlike any other stencil I have in my stash. So I'm really happy with how it turned out. And look how pretty those flowers are. I'm definitely going to save this for another project since it doesn't make it on this layout. So with the magic of video, the embossing paste is now dry. So I'm going to flip the stencil over and I'm going to line it up with those flowers that I had created. And you'll be able to see where the leaves need to line up, and then also line up the little stems within the flower. Now I'm going to use some washi tape to hold this in place because I do need to make sure that this stays positioned exactly where I need it, since the leaves and the stems need to line up with the embossing paste that I've already placed onto that cardstock. And for these leaves, I'm just going to use some cheap acrylic paint from my stash along with Altenew's embossing paste. And this paint has been in my stash a really long time, so I didn't mix it well enough before I tried to place it on that packaging. That's why it looked a little oily and a little runny. It still looks a little runny, but I just need it for the color, so no biggie here. So I'm going to add some of that embossing paste for the leaves, and again, this turns out to be pretty bright. I end up adding a little bit more paint. I was trying to match it to one of the chipboard pieces from the Live Your Dream scrapbook collection from Altenew, so I wanted it to be fairly bright, but then it was a little too bright, so I ended up having to add some white acrylic paint again just to tone it down a little bit. So once I have that color mixed to my liking, I'm going to go ahead and apply it to the leaves. Now, one thing I want to mention is I was not able to get this stencil completely flat against that paper because the flowers are dimensional from the embossing paste. So I did have a little bit of bleed through on this green when I was applying it, kind of bled underneath the stencil, because the flowers are dimensional. I don't think you would have a problem with this at all if you were using inks or if you were using acrylic paints because it's so much thinner. But if you are using embossing paste, you really want to make sure that you hold that stencil down as tight to the paper as you can to try to limit any bleed through. Now, for what I had intended on using these flowers for, it wouldn't have made a difference because I was just going to fussy cut them out. So I could have just fussy cut around those areas that kind of seeped underneath the stencil. But just a little tip or a little trick for you in case you decide to go ahead and purchase the stencil. It is a super fun stencil and I will definitely be using it again. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and start moving on to the layout. This yellow embossing paste is pretty much dry. I am going to be using a lot of embellishments from the Live Your Dream scrapbook collection. That is a scrapbook collection from Altenew. And I'm going to be using some of the chipboard pieces, some of the die cuts, and some of the clear stickers that I have already applied to white cardstock and fussy cut them out. So they look a little bit more like a die cut than they do a clear sticker. But I'm just working on arranging my embellishments. I knew that I wanted to have a couple different clusters going on, and I really liked those potted plant chipboard pieces. My photo was taken last summer and I'm on my patio, and I thought that those chipboard pieces looked like something that you would see on a patio, so I thought it just fit the theme of the layout really well. So at this point, I decided that I'm going to go ahead and cut out that starburst or that sunburst that I had used the yellow embossing paste on. And just a side note here, if you've watched my videos before, you're not at all surprised by that cameo from my cat. Her name is Cloud, in case you haven't watched my videos before, and she loves my craft room. If I'm in my craft room, she's in there with me. She loves getting on my desk. She loves trying to sit behind me on my chair, get in the windows, everything. So she's always in there with me. So she usually makes an appearance on my videos because she will jump up on my desk when I am recording. So anyway, back to the video. So I decided to go ahead and cut out that sunburst because I wanted to use it more as a 6x6 pattern paper, and I wanted to kind of ruffle the edges up a little bit, and I thought that it would just add a little bit more dimension if it was actually cut out from the background. Now here, I left this in the video also because I don't end up using this mixed media background, but I just wanted to show that a lot of the time there's a process that I have to go through, and not all of my layouts just fall together. I usually will try a few different things and then decide that I don't like it before I actually get to the end result. So I just wanted to leave this in here. Whenever I create these mixed media backgrounds, I do always save them if I don't use them, because I think at some point I'll be able to use this for something, whether it's for die cutting or whether it's for another scrapbook layout, whatever it may be. I usually find a way to use them. So here I am thinking that maybe if I add another pattern to the background, I'll like the mixed media a little bit more, but I still don't really love it. That pattern paper is from, I believe it's from the very first scrapbook collection that Altenew released. It's called Reflection, and I really like the pattern paper. It just really wasn't fitting what I was trying to go for with this layout. So I went ahead and moved back to a different sheet of white cardstock, and here I'm just using an edge distresser to ruffle up the edges of that embossed background just to give it a little bit more texture, and I will kind of fold it and ruffle it a little bit more. But I'm going to place that on the background just as I would a 6x6 piece of pattern paper. So now one thing about a white cardstock background is sometimes I just feel like they look a little boring, like I need to jazz them up a little bit, and I don't think that's the case when I see other people's 12x12 scrapbooks or their 8.5x11 scrapbook pages when they use just a plain white piece of paper. But I just feel like I need to fill in more of the background, especially on a 12x12, because there is so much working space. So here I've grabbed another stencil from the new release, and this is the Ombre Stripe stencil. And I'm just using a couple different products from my stash. I have some gelatos and then also some art crayons. And I'm just trying to get a color combination that's pretty close to the pink that's in the Live Your Dream scrapbook collection that I'm going to be using those embellishments from. So I'm just combining some colors, just trying to figure out what I want to do with that. And I am going to use that Ombre Stripe stencil on my background, and I'm just going to use a stencil brush to apply a little bit of color. So I'm going to place that stencil just kind of crooked behind that starburst or sunburst that I have there. And I'm just very messily going to apply some color to the background. And you probably just heard my cat meow because she has now joined me for the voiceover. So sorry if you hear her purring or if she meows again. She's a very talkative cat. So I'm going to go ahead and just, like I said, loosely and roughly apply some color to the background. I just wanted to have a little something behind that sunburst, just a little bit of some visual interest. And it ends up being very light on the background. I do cover up a lot of it in my photos. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but it does add just a little something extra in that area. So now I'm going to start bringing in the embellishments, and I did add some machine stitching. That little banner piece on the bottom had some little faux stitching, some little marks on it, and I just went ahead and added some black machine stitching through that. And then I also added a little bit of black machine stitching through that pink banner on the top left. I did add my journaling using my We Are Memory Keepers typecast typewriter. And then for my title, it's just going to be quiet. And I'm going to use the black alphas from the first scrapbook collection, that Reflection scrapbook collection that Altenew has out. I also added in just a teensy bit of some washi tape, and it's actually the Botanical Rhapsody washi tape. It's one of the giant rolls that Altenew has out, and I had created a layout with that washi tape, I believe last month, and I had fussy cut a lot of the images out, and I just saved them in a bag so that way I can use them for die cuts for upcoming projects. And it's actually that little leaf cluster that is underneath the orange flower right now, so you'll see me grab it in a moment, but that's actually some washi. I didn't want you thinking it was a die cut from the Live Your Dream scrapbook collection, but it matches perfectly. It really matches those florals in that pot that is above my photo, so I was really happy that it matched so well. Okay, so here are the still shots. I did add some black splatters, the date, and then I also added some white machine stitching around that sunburst and then kind of around the outside edge just to help tie it in, just to make it look like it was a little bit more inclusive in the layout. And I'm really happy with how this came together. The stencils are amazing. Again, I do want to encourage you to head to my blog so you can check out the details on the giveaway. And so you can hop along on the blog hop and take a look at all the other projects that the other designers have created. I will be back again soon with a new layout and process video. As always, I just want to thank you so much for watching.